Right, good morning everyone and welcome to the Cabinet meeting of North Norfolk District Council on Monday, June the 7th. First of all, do I have any apologies for absence? I'm only aware of Sarah Budikova. Right, if you then move to the minutes, let's go through it page by page 1, page 2, page 3, page 4 and page 5. I'm not seeing any questions or concerns, so can I formally have somebody to move those minutes, please? That's Councillor Richard Kershaw. Can I have a seconder, please? That's Councillor Lucy Shires. Thank you. Public questions and statements. As far as I'm aware, there are none. Any items of urgent business? I'm not aware of any. Declarations of interest. Has anybody got any declarations of interest? No declarations of interest. Members' questions. Normally, we take members' questions as per agenda items. Unless anybody wishes to raise something now as per an agenda item, I'll take questions as we go through the agenda. Okay. Recommendations from overview and scrutiny. Councillor Nigel Dixon.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for that. I'm happy to report there are no recommendations from the May meeting of overview and scrutiny to bring to Cabinet today.
Right. Okay. Thank you very much. Right. Recommendations from Planning Policy and Built Heritage Working Party. Councillor Toy.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, you have before you the results from the Glaven Valley appraisals, which moved some boundaries slightly. But as in the recommendation there, I bring those to the Cabinet and propose them. Thank you.
Right. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Angie Fitch-Tillett. Thank you. Has anybody got any questions? Right. Can I have a vote in favour then, please? Thank you. Right, that's unanimous. Adoption of the Ryberg Neighbourhood Plan. Councillor Toy.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, we have before you here the final results from the referendum, which was held during the elections recently, which was a 43% turnout with 213 for and 32 against the Ryberg Plan, which has obviously been through all the regulatory stages. And this comes to you now today as a final plan, with also a recommendation for the leader to sign the decision statement so that it can be incorporated into planning considerations. Thank you.
Right, do I have a seconder? Councillor Virginia Gay. Do I have any comments or questions? I believe it's the second one that neighbourhood plan that's been approved. It's a torturous process, but we do get there with them.
Yeah, it takes some time, Mr. Chairman, but worthwhile.
Right, vote in favour, please. Can I have all those in favour? Thank you. Right, agenda item 10, the North Norfolk Sustainable Communities Fund, the annual review. Councillor Virginia Gay. Right. Nigel, is yours working behind you?
Yeah, mine's working. These are.
Right. Come and sit here.
Right. This is working.
Yes, I can hear you. Do we wait or can we proceed? We can proceed. Carry on, Virginia.
Thank you. I would like to recommend this report to all of you. It demonstrates that our fund has continued to support the district throughout this year of COVID. And I would like to record my thanks to Sonia Shooter, who wrote the report, and especially to the members of the panel who come from all parties, who make their decisions without interference. And I'd like to say, I think that you have information here to show clearly how our funds have been dispensed in the past year. We would like to see more environmental projects in the future, but that's up to all of us to encourage our constituents to go out and put their projects forward. Thank you, Chairman.
Right. Do I have a seconder first? Councillor Kershaw. Do I have any comments, first of all, from Cabinet members? Thank you. Councillor Toy.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just wanted to say how pleased I was to see the equal distribution of the map and how it's equally balanced and it's well distributed. So thank you.
Do I have any questions from other members? Councillor Rest.
Thank you, Chairman. Good morning. Just a comment, really. I noticed the really plus side now with this is that there's much more match funding is having to be prepared. I think previously one might agree that it was a little bit sort of all given by us, and as long as they paid the postage, we would be willing to send the money. But I think now that we've drawn the lines and you've made them much more clear, I think it's a very fair system, and it's nice to see it in action. Thank you.
Right, I've got no other comments or questions that I can see. So can I have?
I'll just ask to receive a noted, Chairman.
Just to receive a noted. Emma, does this go to overview and scrutiny or not?
Has done previously, so if the chair wants
Well, it's over to you, Nigel, and the Vice Chair. Oh, right. Right. Can you hear me now? Right. So the question I asked was whether or not it now goes on to overview and scrutiny. And I was told that's a matter of discretion for yourself as chair and the vice chair when you set the agenda. So I'll leave it in your capable hands. Okay. So all those in favour, please, of noting the report. All right, thank you. Right, item 11 is managing performance. This is the hard copy, page 23. The Cabinet's asked to note this report. This report is for the period January to March 2021. The report has an executive summary where it sets out the achievements to date, and it then goes into the detail within each of the major areas of the council's responsibilities. Steve, is there anything, as in the absence of the chief executive, you wish to say at this point?
Thank you, Chair. No, there's nothing of significance to share with you. The report's before you, I think, in terms of any questions that you might have of areas. Just a reminder that obviously this is a report for the period that the chair has said. So that's the January to March report. I think we have made some slight adjustments where a number of officers had perhaps put in later data. So you might look at some areas and think, oh, there's some stuff that's more up to date than perhaps March, but that is a work in progress for us. I think just to make sure that officers are providing the right period, but other than that, and we've dealt with the majority of those, but just in case you look at the stuff and think, hang on, this is more recent than that. But other than that, I'm happy to take any questions that you might have.
Right, Angie, I'll take questions first of all from the cabinet, and then I'll turn to the other members. Right, so you're moving that we note the report. Oh, right, by all means, yes, sorry.
Chair, whilst Councillor Fitch moves, we have someone from IT, I think, are they looking at it or not? Okay, so we will get that looked at for future meetings, but it seems like there is an issue that appears to be in the wiring system. So it might be that middle row is just the problem at the moment.
Yes, I think when I was here last for a meeting, I think we were having a problem with that little one, so it needs sorting. Right, Councillor Angie Fitch-Tillett.
Yeah, thank you. I'm now live. I just want to draw your attention, please, to page 31, which is the executive summary. And in the middle of the page, it's saying climate, coast, and the environment. And in the bullet points underneath, there is absolutely no mention of the coast whatsoever, which I find very disappointing. I have to say that if you look within the body of the report, every single item is green, and a huge tribute goes to the coastal management staff for performing as well as they do. They are best, but above all of the other parts of this council. So I think they need a huge credit, and I would ask, please, that as we do have a title, Climate, Coast and the Environment, that coast and all their good work is incorporated in the future. Thank you.
I think that's a very valid point, and Steve could ask officers to address that in future reports.
Yes, of course.
Right, any further comments from cabinet members? Right, other members. John.
Thank you, Chairman. Just an observation really, and a sort of guarantee if I could get one. Various pages on the green paper numbers, 52, 77 and 78, have obviously the identification as a red triangle. The red triangle meaning obviously that the target hasn't been reached or there is a serious delay. And I can understand some of them, they're quite obvious things, one of which is to establish a youth council. Really what I'm looking for is an assurance that these will be looked at, and hopefully as soon as possible, these particular items will be addressed and not going to be sort of pushed out of the way and pretend that we can't do anything. I see one of your members has got a hand up.
Councillor Shires.
Thank you, Councillor Rest and Mr. Chairman. The Youth Council in particular is something that I'm especially passionate about because our youth voice is not often heard across North Norfolk. And I remember speaking to our very own Emma Denny many months ago before the pandemic about this important matter. And I can absolutely assure you that now we have a red triangle, which means that we can start doing something about it, that we will have a Youth Council.
Councillor Cushing.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. In the February budget meeting, you will recall we had a debate where I raised concerns about the lack of preparation for work to close the impending anticipated deficit of, I think around about £2 to £3 million in years to come. So can I take you to page 68 and item 6.2.1? What work, can you give us an update? Because there's very little in there in terms of the work that's been actually done to develop ideas in order to close those. I'm also slightly concerned as that it doesn't get sort of a higher focus within the cabinet and the council.
Well, since the budget meeting, the finance officers have been dealing with the end of year accounts and sorting that through. But in terms of where my mind is, I can assure you, I'm in the process of asking for a briefing meeting with them, and I want it pretty shortly, where the kind of questions that you're raising about next year's budget, we can actually discuss, and we can discuss the plans and the preparation. We are talking about a zero-based budgeting exercise. We are talking about looking at potentially other savings, whether or not we have to do anything with charges. In other words, we need to make an early start on work for next year to arrive at a balanced budget. And we do not want to be doing it in the last month or two. We want to go through this in a measured and serious way.
If I may just come back, can you explain to me why, if you look at the list of priorities in terms of the actions which are pulled out as being priorities in the first section, this doesn't appear to be one of them. In fact, it's not one of them. It's not listed there. Why is that?
What in terms of what I just said?
Yeah, just you look at, if you go to page 34, you've got the key priorities. 6.2.1 is not listed as one of those as being a key priority. I just wondered why that is the case. So I thought it would be, given that we're actually looking at potentially huge deficit coming down the line. I'd have thought that would be probably one of the primary things, certainly if I were leading the council, that I'd be concerned about looking at that. I just wondered why it's not in there.
Well, there's not much more I can add other than what I've said to you. It's a matter I want an early start on. In the Chancellor's budget, there was no statement about reform of social services funding. My understanding from initial briefings and information I've received from officers is that that probably means the fair funding review won't be completed and brought in for the next financial year. I only flag that up because that just raises the uncertainties that we have in terms of what future government support will be available for district authorities. But I can only emphasise the reason I want to sit down with officers very quickly now and and deal with this is for the reasons I've previously stated. I want this to be done in the planned and way, and I don't want it to be done in a rushed way.
Could we have an update at the next cabinet meeting on that, please?
I'm quite happy to give you, well, there should be the outturn report at the next cabinet meeting, which will provide an opportunity of, after the COVID year we've experienced, what the final results are, and also that should provide the opportunity for the Section 151 officer to be present. And that report in itself will go to overview and scrutiny. In my mind, that's where I've indicated to you, that's where my mind is now turning, with all the uncertainties that are involved. And I listen to portfolio holders in other authorities, whether the counties or districts. It's, I suppose, uncertainties about what we have to plan for looms large in all our minds.
I'll wait to hear for next meeting then, okay?
Yeah,
Thank you.
that's not a problem.
Chair, if I can, clearly, the financial sustainability and growth of this authority is key to us. It is a priority. It is set out within the corporate plan. There are a number of areas of delivery that we said that we're committed to. Some of those aren't due to start. Some of those have been delayed by COVID, and I understand the position. From an officer point of view, it's high on the list of things. We are acutely aware, particularly within CLT, of the current position we find ourselves in from a budgetary point of view. And there are some, I've had conversations with Duncan Ellis recently as the 151 officer about some of the areas of improvement that we can look at in respect of our financial, or that budgetary situation and understanding. Some of those are set out within, the priorities, etc. And I think it's key that we continue to have that at the forefront of our minds as we move forward.
Welcome.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much, Chair. Looking at the reasons for recommendations on this item, which is to ensure the objectives of the council are achieved, I'm somewhat concerned that this may not be the case. When you look at some of the items, such as the economic growth strategy has been parked, developing green energy initiatives has no due date, and there are 2,894 people on the housing list, and you built 108 affordable houses last year, and you did planning permission for 172 more. So to me, there seems a bit of grade inflation here in some of the metrics, and there's some areas that are green that perhaps should be amber, or even amber that should be red, and that's a slight concern that perhaps we might not be getting to a position that we want to be next year in terms of sustainability if we're not really critical about what we're achieving at the moment.
Steve.
I suppose if you were to look at this in the fullness of the last year, and that when some of those achievements were set out, no one expected to have a global pandemic wedged in the middle of it. And I think, from my perspective, we have the fact that we have continued to achieve against a number of our targets. It is a testament to this authority and to what we have done. We've looked at this fairly hard in terms of the grading, and this has been something that we've looked at both at corporate leadership team, and I know that Steve Blatch, as the Chief Executive, has looked at quite long and hard in terms of your position around, are we, over egging the pudding as to what we have achieved? And I think it's always, you make judgments in terms of that, but I think we have been, we have held to account some of those areas, that we have provided challenge into where we are with them. Some of those are a journey, and in the respect of that, there are elements of the journey that are further ahead and elements that are further behind within what is sometimes quite wide-ranging parts of the objective. So if you were to break it down into a very high degree of granularity, you would probably find that there were some bits we'd expected to achieve that we haven't, but there are also some bits of that objective where we're probably further ahead than we anticipated. In terms of the number of properties that we've built compared with the homeless list, clearly we have no control over the number of people who are becoming homeless. We do have a control over the number or who are on the list, and we do have control over what we're doing. And I think in terms of what we've achieved in that, both in terms of acquiring properties to deal with temporary accommodation and looking at trying to push through as many properties into that affordable housing as we're able to, there has been achievement in that. We are ahead of, we're ahead of what we wanted to be in terms of number of new properties built within Norfolk, not necessarily in terms of affordable homes, for the number that are coming off development. But, set this against global pandemic and what we've achieved in the meantime, I think you will recognise that this authority has done an awful lot to support North Norfolk and to achieve its objectives.
Thank you. I mean, when can I ask another question? When do we stop using the pandemic as a reason for not performing?
This is a January to March report. I don't think that you would say the pandemic was over then, if I'm honest. We were probably at the highest levels in January to March of COVID cases within North Norfolk that we've had in the entire time. If you want to talk about, when we come to the future, then we will stop using, COVID, but it's still having impacts on us at the current time. we are still putting an awful lot of effort into the fact that this year we have a massive number of visitors coming to North Norfolk, and we've got extra resources going into preparing for that and dealing with it. And I'm getting regular contact from councillors about cleanliness in coastal areas and about a range of issues to do with people who are coming and the impact, the ongoing impact. We're still paying out grants to businesses. There is an ongoing workload that's associated with the response or the recovery from COVID. So it's going to be our reality for some continuing period of time, I'm afraid. I'm not suggesting that that's going to have an impact on our performance, and clearly we want to be moving forward with an awful lot of these issues in terms of getting delivery sorted around the corporate plan and the delivery plan. But in January we were in a position where we were very focused on the level of COVID within North Norfolk, January to March, level of COVID within North Norfolk, and doing all that we could to prevent and minimise the spread.
Thank you.
Councillor Lloyd. Sorry, did you have a question, Councillor Dixon? Right, I'll take yours first. Sorry, can you hear me?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yes, I want to just raise some observations, if I may, just picking up on one earlier point that was mentioned with regard to what I would call the clarity of the report. I have to say that of all the performance management reports that I've gotten used to over the years that I've been here, this isn't the easiest, I have to say, and in my view, it's not the clearest. But just turning to page 34 and picking up on the point raised with regard to priorities, and I'm quite okay with colours and pictures and so forth. They're quite, I think, informative. The difficulty I have is that if you look on page 34, well, if you've looked already on page 29, you see that key priorities are listed there on page 5, and so we look at that page and we see the very short text at the top, and we see the pie chart. We got a lot of wasted space at the bottom there. Wouldn't it be good if we listed the, I don't know, the top 10 priorities or whatever it is? Whatever it is, maybe you could list those segments of the circle there, of the pie chart, with regard to which priorities they are, because I don't think that gives a very good, a very easy picture to absorb where we are. I do wonder whether some of the indicators that we've got are more about expressing how well our processes are working rather than our outcomes. I do wonder about that. And there's one other observation that I want to make, and this is probably the more difficult one, because anecdotally, I, as a ward member and wearing my county division hat as well, receive sight of problems which are quite concerning. I have to say, just to allay any concern that Councillor Fitz-Tillett might have, none of them involve coast. But there are one or two portfolios where problems are cropping up very regularly. And most of those problems are of the kind that our customers are coming to me either as the ward member, or in some cases they're coming to me as the county member, but I don't turn them away on the basis that it's not my patch. I always pass them on to the ward member, and in some cases to the cabinet member, because I feel that's the right thing to do. But I have to say, Mr. Chairman, that anecdotally, barely a week passes when I don't find myself at the end of a contact from a business or an individual who has not received a good experience from North Norfolk. And that worries me, because it worries me that it's not reflected in this report. In one sense, I'm kind of accepting of it in the sense that we have had a very challenging year. There's no doubt about that. And there'll be no harm whatsoever, in my view, if some of the impact of that, or should I say the appropriate level of impact of that, was reflected in this report, because it's almost self-explanatory. You cannot have an epidemic on the scale that we have without there being a substantial impact on the delivery of a whole range of services, not just in North Norfolk District Council, but in others as well. So I don't think there's any problem in reflecting that, but I do see a fundamental inconsistency with what I'm experiencing as both a ward and a divisional member about problems, probably in 3 parts of this organisation. And I'm very happy to engage with the cabinet members. In fact, in 2 cases, I am engaged already, and I'm happy to do so in the 3rd case as well. So I'm very happy to share those experiences. And I hope that we can reach a position where I'm more reconciled with what I see in this report versus what is actually the experience of the customers out there and how they're passing that on to me. So I think what I really would like is a note of concern that I have as Overview and Scrutiny Chairman and as a ward member, that there is, I think, some inconsistency here between what I read in this report and what I am experiencing outside. I don't mean that to be a criticism in itself. I mean that to be an observation that we ought to be looking into and to perhaps test whether this form of performance management and the way in which we present this is the best that we could do. I rest my case at that, Mr. Chairman.
Well, I think when it comes back to overview and scrutiny, that's probably a place where you can look at that in more detail. I'll just make this observation. There's probably a week that and there's rarely a week goes by where I don't get somebody approaching me, so now as a district member, previously as a counter member, moaning about or criticising about something. And it's not always easy to reflect that experience in what you see in terms of progress or operational reports that come before either the district or, in my case, previously at the county council. But that doesn't mean that we shouldn't try to pick some of this up and be more reflective. I know what you say about the 10 priorities. Perhaps we need to look at that. I'm much more interested in outcomes than I am about processes. Until something's actually delivered, as far as I'm concerned, it's not done. So that, to me, is another thing that if we can produce a report which is more reflective of some of those things, it's work in progress. The minutes are being taken today. Steve Hems is here today, and we can certainly take that on board. So, you know, I note what you say, but it's a question of balancing achievements, and we have made some real achievements in what has been a particularly difficult period, an exceptional year, but also is more reflective at times where perhaps we're not making the progress that we would like. Right, I've got Councillor, can I take Councillor Shires first and then Councillor Lloyd? And then I want to try and bring this to a close.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Councillor Dixon, as customer focus will fall under me, I would be absolutely delighted to drive improvement. And if you want to work with me to do that, then I'd be even more delighted.
Well, there you are. There's an offer there. Councillor Lloyd.
Should there be a matter of the same, I should be rest assured that I will.
I mean, all I can say, when we were, I brought Lucy in this morning from North Walsham to San. And we did spend at least 10 minutes, quarter of an hour talking about a range of phone calls we got, some of which were positive over the last week, but some of which were moaning about a range of things. So that's just a week's gone by. It's life. Anyway, Councillor Lloyd.
Thank you, Chair. Just picking up on what's been said. I think a little bit of perspective is required here, because I remember sitting here in opposition a number of years ago, asking similar questions to that administration. I found the reports difficult to follow, difficult to track. I think when this administration came in, we addressed a lot of those issues, and we also added a lot more detail. The more detail you add, the more up you are for criticism. I would also like to congratulate the officers on the work that has been done against our corporate plan. They've made a huge amount of progress, despite certainly in the early days of the COVID, you know, nearly all officers being involved in some shape or form with dealing with COVID to protect our residents. And we felt as Cabinet that was the right thing to do. How long we will use that excuse for will depend on how long the controls go on for. I know in environmental health we still have a large number of people working on COVID, and whilst they're doing that, they can't be everywhere and deliver the corporate plan, but we set our priorities as we go along. So I'd like to record my thanks to officers for the work they've done. And on, I think green initiatives were mentioned earlier. We just set our environmental charter. The next stage, first meeting this week, is to set out how we're going to achieve carbon neutrality by 2030. And please watch this space, and there'll be lots coming in the next few months. Thank you.
Right, thank you very much for that. And yes, I think we should all be grateful to what the officers have done during this particularly difficult period.
Chair, sorry.
Yes.
So this report, I suppose, in terms of its style and content, it's a work in progress going forward in terms of what is beneficial for members. So if there are areas that anybody feels could be improved in terms of clarity or in terms of how you would like to see it, please feed those back into us, because we can reflect those into future reports. I wouldn't want you to feel that this is in terms of the style or the format, this is using InPhase, which is an awful lot easier. But if there's things you want to see in a slightly different way or different information, I'm sure we can probably look at providing that to you over a period of time. And certainly, I think this document has improved dramatically over the last probably year in terms of the clarity of it. But we can work with you to get that better. And if any of Councillor Dixon, if there are areas of concern that you haven't raised into the officer core at a CLT, a corporate leadership team level, please do so, because clearly we want to be in a position where we're aware of that, although I'm sure portfolio holders will make us aware when you go to them. Thank you.
Right, I think we've had plenty of time on that one. So I think somebody moved it, didn't they? Noted this. Sorry. Right, yes, and can I have a seconder? Wendy Fredericks, thank you. Right, can I have all those in favour, please? Thank you. Right, next item on the agenda is the District Council's Equality, Diversity and Inclusion Policy. I'll just go to the page. Right. I think one of the difficulties we got here is that I'm working to a hard copy, and I think if you're actually on your iPads, there's probably a slightly different page numbering. So I'm on page 91. Right, this is to recommend to full council the formal adoption of the equality objectives and the equality, diversity and inclusion policy. When you look at this report, you'll see that we sought the advice of the county council in terms of preparing this policy. That came about following concerns that were raised at overview and scrutiny. It sets out to us on the following page, as we're required to do under the public sector equality duty, the council's objectives. It also talks about an annual action plan, recognises the need to improve data collection, and that there is also, in terms of the reporting of the policy, an annual report will be produced. What I would like to suggest to Cabinet is that, I'm looking here at my pages, on page 97, paragraph 13, it states, we will keep this policy and any associated codes of practice under annual review. And I would wish to add to that by way of amendment and report that annual review to relevant committees. The reason I'm suggesting that is that it's not just an annual report, it does have to go to relevant committees. And the second one I would like to suggest is that under further information, we insert a paragraph in there that this policy should be read in conjunction with the annual action plan and other relevant documents. In other words, it's just clarifying that this is a policy, but it needs to be tied in with other documents. So what I'm putting to Cabinet and moving this, I'd like to move that with those two amendments. Can I please have a seconder for that? Thank you very much, Councillor Gay. Right. The only other thing I was going to say, this goes to full council. This is a matter which has gone backwards and forwards a bit. It has gone to overview and scrutiny. As far as the Cabinet is concerned, I think if overview and scrutiny want to have a further look at this, that is their privilege. And then, but we would like it to go on to the next full council meeting. But if for this overview and scrutiny wish to look at it and make any further comments before it comes to full council, we are relaxed about that and accepting of it. So can I have I've got a seconder. Right, any further comments or questions? Councillor Gay, then I'll take Councillor Dixon.
I'd like to say, first of all, Chairman, that I support the amendments. I think it's important to keep this document as a live document and not something that's simply sitting in a database or on a shelf. And bringing it back to committees will mean that it's kept front and centre within people's minds, I think. And also, members have been expecting this policy for a while, so I hope we can proceed with it. Thank you, Chairman.
Councillor Dixon.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yes, I'd really like a little bit of clarification if I can. Mr. Chairman, you won't need me to tell you that this document has been a long time in the coming.
Right.
And I think it wouldn't be an overstatement to say that it's had a little bit of a troubled route in reaching this position. However, be that as it may, I would acknowledge a very helpful conversation that I had with Mr. Hems prior to this document being drafted, and to, I think, clarify some of the key messages that came out of overview and scrutiny during its pre-scrutiny of this matter. So I acknowledge that, and I think that's a helpful thing to do. And I think the document that we have before us today is more in keeping with what I think I would certainly recognise, and I think most others would recognise as a policy statement. So the clarification that I really seek is, I may be getting it wrong, but we've got a covering paper, which is at page 91 through to 94. Then we've got the policy itself, which runs from 95 through to 98. And then we've got 99 and 100 through to 101. And I'm not sure whether the 99 through to 101 is actually part of the policy or whether it's something else. My reason for asking that is that in pages, or rather on page 100, is in effect the genesis of this policy, in the sense that in December of 19, I seem to recall it was, when this council agreed to adopt the definition of anti-Semitism as described halfway down the page of 100. So I'm wondering, is that actually enshrined in this policy, or is that attached to the policy in some other way? I wonder if you can just clarify whether that's integrated into the policy now or not. The second point I'd like to make is I acknowledge that the document has had a significant contribution from the County Council in terms of its policy development. I'm just wondering why we didn't take that route many, many months ago. Two questions, please.
So in terms of in terms of the pages 99 through to 101, they're effectively the footnotes that explain the definitions, etc. So the characteristics of definitions. They therefore form part of the policy document. I think the intent was to try and keep the policy as tight as possible in terms of an understandable read for anybody, without, I don't want to use the word cluttered, because I don't want to denigrate what's in those footnotes, but without causing people to wade through definitions. So we've taken them out into the footnotes at the back with the deliberate intention of making the policy as clear and as applicable as possible, so that it does form part of the policy because it's part of the definitions that we have that go within that. I think if we were to try and put all the definitions within the document, and you then start to get into not just the anti-Semitism, but into all the other definitions around religion and everything else within it, it would become very clouded and very unclear, hence the reason. The honest answer to your question as to why we didn't approach county earlier, I don't know. In terms of the position, I suppose, whether it was something that we were aware that they offered as a service, I am slightly unsure. But certainly we will be, we are aware of that. We will, where we need to, seek guidance and assistance from them if it is applicable in the future.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. That's helpful on both points. I wonder then whether you've mentioned the word footnote. I can't see footnote on this document. I may have missed it, but I just wonder whether there is some way in which we could ensure that linkage that you describe is clearer.
I'm certainly happy. Sorry, Councillor Gay. It keeps your steps up, Councillor Gay.
I was just going to suggest that they're entitled end notes or something like that. That would make it perfectly obvious.
I'm very happy to make that a clearer title of that document. So,
right, yes, I think that's the way of doing with it. I mean, all I can say about anti-Semitism in terms of the protected characteristics, that's reflected in religion and belief, and it's reflected in race. There is an abundance of case law which includes anti-Semitism within those characteristics. And if you can also take Islamophobia as another one, which is often referred to. Again, that is religion and belief and race, and it's protected in those areas. Right, so I've got a proposal with those amendments. We've got the footnote as well, and if you can note that, please. And I've got a seconder. All those in favour? Thank you very much. That's that one. Right, the last one is the disposal of a property. There's a recommendation here that the Cabinet approves the disposal of this property. Should there be any further changes to the offer that's made, that will be delegated back to the portfolio holder. This did come before the Cabinet at its last meeting. That particular interest seems to have waned. There is now a range of other interests and a particularly attractive interest. And therefore, it's recommended that we approve the disposal of the property on that basis. Clearly, if there's any members have questions that relate to the actual figures or the parties concerned, I will have to go below the line. But in the meantime, I move the recommendation that we dispose of this property. Do I have a seconder, please? Councillor Toy. Do I have any comments from Cabinet members? Do I have any comments from other councillors? Hopefully now this will come to a conclusion. Sorry, yes.
No, so very good result. Thank you, Chairman. Will the money be ring fenced for housing, or does it go into some other general pot?
When councils dispose of capital assets, it normally goes into a central fund. And that's the policy of this council. And it's then allocated from that for appropriate priorities that then arise. So it could be housing, it could be something else. But the policy of the council, it's not ring-fenced capital receipts to a particular area or to a particular priority.
Thank you. I apologise for answering. I looked for the disposal policy on the website, but I couldn't find it. It cites it here, but I wouldn't have asked you otherwise. Thank you.
Yeah, but members frequently ask that question. There's a balance to be drawn sometimes between, if you sell something, quite often it will go back to the area concerned, or some of it. But you also need to have a level of flexibility. Right, all those in favour? Right, thank you very much. Now I think that brings us to the end of this particular meeting. I don't think there's no exclusion of the press and public. There's no private business. So at just coming up to 5 to 11, bring this meeting to a close, and thank everybody for